The great hall of the Valkorath flagship stretched for nearly a mile. Pillars of black stone rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Banners hung between them, each one marking a conquered world. There were thousands of these banners. Some were so old that their colors had faded to gray. Supreme War Master Keth Varan stood at the center of the hall. His scaled skin was the color of dark iron. His eyes burned like dying stars. Around him sat the War Council, the 12 most powerful military commanders in the known galaxy. They had gathered aboard the Times Axiom of Conquest Times to hear his words. 4,000 species, Keth Varan said. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. 4,000 species have stood before us. 4,000 species have fallen. The council members nodded. This was not boasting. This was simple history. The Valkorath hegemony had ruled the Orion Spur for 12,000 years. In all that time, they had never lost a war. They had never even come close. War is not just our strength, Keth Varan continued. It is our art, our religion, our very reason for existence. We have studied it. We have perfected it. We have reduced it to a science that cannot fail. He raised one clawed hand. Behind him, a massive screen flickered to life. It showed the 18 principles of absolute victory. The sacred doctrines that had guided Valkorath warfare since the beginning of their empire. Every Valkorath warrior learned these principles before they could walk. Every battle was fought according to their wisdom. They covered everything from fleet formations to supply lines to the proper moment to strike. Follow the principles, and victory was certain. This was not belief. This was mathematical fact. We are the masters of war, Keth Varan said. No species has ever matched us. No species ever will. The council members struck their fists against their chests in salute. The sound echoed like a drumbeat. It was at this moment that a messenger entered the hall. He was young, his scales still bright with youth. He approached the War Master with his head bowed low. Speak, Keth Varan commanded. Supreme One, our scouts have returned from the galaxy's edge. They have found a new species. This was not unusual news. The Valkorath discovered new species regularly. Most were primitive. Some had achieved basic space travel. All of them fell the same way. Tell me of them, Keth Varan said. He sounded almost bored. They call themselves humans, Supreme One. They inhabit a small planet in an unremarkable system. They have achieved basic space travel but have not yet left their own star. Their military strength? The messenger hesitated. They appear to have none worth mentioning, Supreme One. They have small ships, primitive weapons. Our analysts estimate their total fleet could be destroyed by a single Valkorath cruiser. Keth Varan made a sound that might have been a laugh. Another species of insects. How many is that now? How many small, weak creatures have we crushed beneath our feet? Countless. Supreme One of the council members, an ancient warrior named Thos, leaned forward. There is something strange in the scout report, War Master. These humans have spent most of their history at war with themselves. Keth Varan turned to face him. With themselves? You mean civil conflict? Constant civil conflict. Supreme One, their history is nothing but war after war. They have developed thousands of different weapons, thousands of different tactics, all to kill each other more efficiently. For a moment, something flickered in Keth Varan's eyes. It might have been curiosity. It might have been concern. But it passed quickly. Savages fighting savages, he said dismissively. This means nothing. They have never faced a true enemy. They have never faced us. The council murmured in agreement. What did it matter if these creatures fought among themselves? Many primitive species did the same. It was a sign of weakness, not strength. A truly advanced civilization would have moved beyond such barbarism. I will dispatch a subjugation fleet, Keth Varan announced. 200 warships, standard protocol for pre-spacefaring primitives. This was, in fact, excessive force. The Valkorath could have conquered most primitive worlds with 50 ships, but Keth Varan believed in overwhelming power. He believed in crushing resistance before it could form. Who shall command the fleet? Asked Thos. Fleet Commander Ythra. He is young and eager for glory. Let him earn his honors against these humans. The council nodded. This conquest would be so easy that it barely required discussion. In a few months, the humans would be added to the long list of subjugated species. Their planet would become a mining colony or perhaps a military outpost. Their people would serve the hegemony, or they would die. This was the way of things. This was how it had always been. The subjugation fleet departed 3 days later. 200 warships, each one capable of destroying cities from orbit. They carried enough soldiers to occupy a dozen worlds. They carried weapons that could crack continents. Fleet Commander Yithra stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars blur as they entered faster than light travel. He was young for a commander, his scales still dark and unmarked by age, but he was ambitious. This mission would be his first great victory. "How long until we reach the human system?" he asked. 3 months, Commander. 3 months. Yithra smiled. In 3 months, he would add another banner to the Great Hall. Another world would fall to the hegemony. The humans would learn what so many species had learned before them. Resistance against the Valkorath was not just futile, it was unthinkable. Before the fleet departed, standard protocol required that they send a message ahead. This was tradition. Every species was given the chance to surrender before the killing began. Most did surrender. They had heard stories of what happened to those who resisted. The message was simple. It was transmitted in every language the Valkorath could translate, including the human tongue called English. "People of Earth, you have been discovered by the Valkorath hegemony. We are the masters of this galaxy. We are the masters of war itself. You have 2 choices. Surrender your world, your resources, and your freedom. Accept your place as servants of the hegemony, or resist, and be erased from existence. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Choose." The message traveled across the void of space. It took weeks to reach the small blue planet called Earth. It was received by human communication stations and translated by human computers. Within hours, it had reached every government on the planet. The world held its breath. And then, after 3 days of silence, humanity sent its response. It was not a surrender. It was not a plea for mercy. It was not even a declaration of war. It was a single word: no. Aboard his flagship, Yithra read the response with confusion. No? What did that mean? Did these creatures not understand their situation? Did they not realize what was coming for them? He showed the message to his officers. They laughed. The humans were clearly stupid as well as weak. They would learn their mistake soon enough. The fleet continued its journey through the stars. 200 warships, carrying the might of an empire that had never known defeat. They had no idea what was waiting for them. On Earth, the message from the stars had changed everything. For the first time in human history, every nation agreed on something. Every old conflict suddenly seemed small and foolish. Every border dispute, every political disagreement, every ancient hatred melted away in the face of a simple truth. Something was coming to destroy them all. And humanity had 3 months to prepare. 3 months passed like a heartbeat. Fleet Commander Yithra stood on the bridge of his flagship as the Valkorath fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The human system spread before him. A yellow star, 8 planets, 1 small blue world that would soon belong to the hegemony. "Begin standard reconnaissance," Yithra ordered. "I want full scans of their defenses before we begin the assault." His officers obeyed. Data flooded the screens around him. And slowly, Yithra's confidence began to crack. "Commander," said his tactical officer, "these readings cannot be correct." "Explain." "The human moon. When our scouts visited 3 months ago, it was barren. Now it is covered in structures, weapons, platforms, shield generators. The entire surface has been fortified." Yithra stared at the data. This was impossible. No species could build so much in so little time. It would take the Valkorath years to construct such defenses. "What about their fleet?" he asked. "Commander, they have ships now. Hundreds of ships. They were not there before." Yithra felt something cold in his chest. It might have been fear. He had never felt it before, so he did not recognize it. "Show me these ships." The main screen flickered. Images appeared of human vessels. They were ugly things. Nothing like the elegant curves of Valkorath warships. They were blocky and brutal, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. They looked like they had been built by creatures who did not care about beauty. Creatures who cared only about destruction. "Their design philosophy makes no sense," said the tactical officer. "They have sacrificed speed and maneuverability for armor and firepower. These ships are not meant to dance through battle. They are meant to take damage and keep fighting." Yithra shook his head. "This is foolish. Our weapons will tear through any armor. Speed is the key to victory." The third principle of absolute victory clearly states, Commander, another officer interrupted. We are receiving a transmission from the human world. Put it on screen. The image changed. A human female appeared. She wore a dark uniform covered in medals and symbols that Yithra did not recognize. Her hair was gray, pulled back tight against her skull. Her eyes were calm. Too calm. I am Admiral Catherine Rourke of the United Earth Navy, she said. You have entered restricted space. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Yithra almost laughed. This creature was ordering him to withdraw. Did she not see the 200 warships behind him? Human, he said. I am Fleet Commander Yithra of the Valkorath Hegemony. You have refused our generous offer of surrender. You will now face the consequences. Your world will burn. Your species will be enslaved. This is your final chance to beg for mercy. Admiral Rourke did not blink. She did not flinch. She looked at him the way a predator looks at prey. Fleet Commander, she said, I'm going to give you some free information. 2 years ago, we intercepted your communications. We learned about your hegemony. We learned about your conquests. We learned about your precious 18 principles of absolute victory. Yithra's blood ran cold. They had intercepted Valkorath communications. They had studied the sacred principles. We've spent 2 years preparing for this moment. Rourke continued. Every factory on Earth has been working day and night. Every scientist, every engineer, every worker has been focused on one goal. We knew you were coming. We've been waiting. You cannot possibly. Your fleet has entered what we call a kill box, Rourke said. You are surrounded by weapons platforms on the lunar surface, missile batteries hidden in the asteroid belt, and ships positioned at points you haven't detected yet. You are already dead. You just don't know it. Yithra straightened his spine. He would not be intimidated by this primitive. You have 200 ships at most. I have 200 warships, each one superior to anything you can build. Your threats are empty. I'm not threatening you, Fleet Commander. I'm informing you. There's a difference. Admiral Rourke paused. Something like pity crossed her face. But I'm not completely without mercy. I'm offering you one chance to withdraw. Take your fleet and leave. Tell your masters that Earth is not worth the cost. Do this, and you can live. Yithra laughed. It was a harsh sound, filled with contempt. You offer us mercy. You dare. We are the Valkorath. We have conquered 4,000 species. We are the masters of war. Admiral Rourke nodded slowly. I figured you'd say that. She turned to someone off-screen. Captain, begin undocking sequence. What are you doing? Yithra demanded. Showing you something. The screen split. Half still showed Admiral Rourke's face. The other half showed a view of the human moon. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a shadow began to move. Something was rising from the lunar surface. Something massive. Yithra's officers scrambled to their sensors. Data flooded the screens. Numbers that made no sense. Measurements that broke every known record. Commander, the tactical officer whispered. That ship is 8 kilometers long. 8 kilometers. The largest Valkorath warship was 2 kilometers. This thing was 4 times bigger. It rose from the moon like a mountain coming to life. Its hull was covered in armor plates thicker than some buildings. Its weapons were visible even from this distance. Massive cannons, missile tubes, things that Yithra's sensors could not even identify. What is that? He breathed. Admiral Rourke's voice answered. That is the UEN Thermopylae. Our first battleship. We built it in 18 months. We built it specifically for you. The Thermopylae cleared the lunar surface and began moving toward the Valkorath fleet. It moved slowly, almost lazily. It had no need to hurry. Nothing could run from it. Nothing could stop it. How is this possible? Yithra demanded. How could you build such a thing? You asked about our history, Rourke said. You know we spent most of it at war with ourselves. What you didn't understand is what that means. We have been building weapons for 10,000 years. We have been improving them, refining them, making them more deadly. Every generation, we got better at killing. Every war taught us new lessons. She leaned closer to the screen. Her eyes were cold. You think you mastered war? You fought other species. Aliens with different biologies, different psychologies, different ways of thinking. We fought ourselves. We fought enemies who thought exactly like us, who knew every trick we knew, who could predict our every move. We had to keep innovating just to survive. We had to keep getting more creative, more ruthless, more desperate. Yithra stared at the approaching battleship. Warning lights flashed across his bridge. His officers shouted reports at him, but he barely heard them. You studied war like a subject in school, Rourke continued. We lived it like a disease. It's in our blood. It's in our bones. It's in the very core of what we are. She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You wanted to meet the masters of war, Fleet Commander. Here we are. The Thermopylae's weapons began to glow. Targeting systems locked onto the Valkarath fleet. 200 warships that had seemed so mighty now looked small and fragile. Yithra opened his mouth to give an order. Any order. Something to break the spell of fear that had frozen his crew. But before he could speak, the Thermopylae fired, and the universe turned white. The first volley from the Valkarath fleet was perfect. 200 warships fired as one. Their weapons synchronized to the microsecond. Energy beams crossed the void like lances of light. Missiles followed in their wake. Thousands of them, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city. This was the Alpha Strike, the most devastating opening move in Valkarath doctrine. It had shattered 1,000 enemy fleets. It had ended wars in seconds. Nothing could survive it. The volley struck the Thermopylae. The massive battleship shuddered. Its shields flared bright as small suns. Explosions bloomed across its hull, and then the light faded. The Thermopylae was still there. Damaged, yes. Scarred and smoking, but still there. Still moving forward. Impossible, Yithra whispered. Commander, their armor, the tactical officer stammered. It is absorbing our weapons. We are barely scratching them. The Valkarath had always designed their ships for speed and firepower. Armor slowed you down. Armor was for species too weak to strike first. The 18 principles taught that the best defense was overwhelming offense. The humans had built their ship to take punishment. They had expected to be hit. They had planned for it. Behind the Thermopylae, the human fleet began to move. 200 ships, each one ugly and brutal, spread out across the battlefield in a pattern that made no sense to Valkarath tacticians. They are not using formations, an officer reported. They are moving randomly. That cannot be, Yithra said. All warfare requires formation. The 7th principle clearly states, Commander, they are not following any principle we recognize. The battle became chaos. Human ships darted between Valkarath formations, attacking from unexpected angles. They used asteroids as cover, hiding behind rocks and striking when the Valkarath ships passed. They sent false signals, making it seem like ships were in places they were not. They jammed Valkarath communications with noise and strange music and what sounded like human laughter. Yithra watched his fleet begin to fracture. His ships could not coordinate. Every time they formed up for a proper attack, the humans disrupted them. This was not war. This was madness. Commander, the human fighters, someone shouted. Small craft had launched from the human fleet. Hundreds of them, each one carrying a single pilot. They swarmed toward the Valkarath ships like insects. Destroy them, Yithra ordered. They are too small to cause damage. The Valkarath point defense systems opened fire. Human fighters exploded by the dozen. But there were so many of them. And they were so fast, so unpredictable. Then Yithra saw something that would haunt his nightmares forever. A human fighter, its weapons destroyed, its hull cracked and burning, flew directly toward a Valkarath cruiser. It did not try to escape. It did not try to survive. It accelerated, pushing its damaged engines to their limit. It rammed the cruiser at full speed. The explosion tore through the cruiser's bridge. The ship began to spin, out of control, its crew dead or dying. They are ramming us, an officer screamed. Their pilots are using themselves as weapons. Yithra could not believe what he was seeing. What kind of species sacrificed their own warriors like this? What kind of madness drove them to such extremes? But it was not madness, it was calculation. The humans knew they were outnumbered. They knew their ships were less advanced. So they used everything they had, including their own lives. The Thermopylae finally returned fire. Its weapons were not elegant. They were not precise. They were brutal. Massive cannons launched slugs of solid metal at a significant fraction of light speed. These slugs had no warheads, no guidance systems. They were just chunks of tungsten, each one weighing several tons. But at that speed, they did not need explosives. They hit Valkarath ships and tore through them like paper. Missiles followed. Not the smart, targeted missiles the Valkarath used. These were older, simpler. Nuclear warheads, fusion bombs, weapons so destructive that most civilized species had abandoned them long ago. And then came the grape shot. Containers exploded near Valkarath formations, releasing clouds of tungsten spheres. Each sphere was small, no bigger than a fist. But there were millions of them, and they moved at unbelievable speeds. They shredded hulls, destroyed sensors, killed crews through the walls of their own ships. Valkarath ships were designed to counter energy weapons. They had shields that could absorb laser fire, armor that could resist plasma. But they had no defense against simple metal moving very fast. "This is barbaric," Yithra shouted. "This is not war." But it was war. It was war as humans had always fought it. Not elegant, not beautiful, just effective. By the third hour of battle, Yithra had lost half his fleet. Ships drifted dead in space. Escape pods scattered like seeds. The Thermopylae had taken terrible damage, but it refused to fall. It kept fighting, kept killing, an unstoppable mountain of metal and fury. Yithra ordered a captured human pilot brought to the bridge. He needed to understand. He needed to know how this was possible. The pilot was young, barely an adult by human standards. Her flight suit was torn and bloody. One of her arms hung at a wrong angle, clearly broken, but she stood straight, and she looked at Yithra without fear. "How do you fight like this?" Yithra demanded. "How do your people sacrifice themselves so willingly? How do you use such terrible weapons?" The pilot smiled. Blood stained her teeth. "You want to know our secret?" she said. "It is simple. We have been killing each other for 200,000 years. Before we had ships, we had bombs. Before bombs, we had guns. Before guns, swords. Before swords, rocks and sticks. We have never stopped fighting. We have never stopped finding new ways to hurt each other." She laughed, and the sound made Yithra's blood run cold. "You think you invented war? You just borrowed it for a while. We are taking it back." Yithra ordered her removed from the bridge. He could not stand to look at her anymore. By the 6th hour, the battle was lost. The Valkarath fleet had been reduced to 40 ships. 40 out of 200. The rest were debris and corpses. The humans had lost ships too, but not nearly as many. And the Thermopylae was still there, still fighting, still refusing to die. Yithra retreated to the edge of the system. His remaining ships gathered around him, broken and scared. For the first time in his life, he had lost. For the first time in Valkarath history, a subjugation fleet had been defeated. He opened a communication channel to Hegemony Command. His hands were shaking. "This is Fleet Commander Yithra. I am transmitting all battle data. These humans are not what we expected. They are not primitives. They are something else entirely." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "They fight without honor. They fight without mercy. They fight like they have nothing to lose. And they have weapons we cannot counter. Tactics we cannot predict." He looked at the distant blue planet, where the human fleet was regrouping. "Send reinforcements. Send everything we have. Because if we do not destroy them now, while they are still weak, I fear they will destroy us." The message traveled across the stars, carrying news that would shake the hegemony to its core. The masters of war had been humbled, and the universe would never be the same. Supreme War Master Kethvoran watched the battle recordings for the 100th time. Each viewing made him more uneasy. Each viewing revealed something new about these humans that he did not want to see. He sat in his private chambers aboard the Axiom of Conquest. Around him, 2,000 warships traveled toward the human system, the largest fleet ever assembled by the hegemony, 10 times the force that had been defeated. It should have been enough. It should have been overwhelming. But Kethvoran was no longer certain of anything. "They learn," he said to himself. "Every engagement, they learn." The recordings showed it clearly. In the early hours of the battle, human tactics had been clumsy, effective, but rough. By the end, they had improved dramatically. They had studied Valkarath responses and adapted. They had found weaknesses and exploited them. Most disturbing was their speed. The humans had built an entire battleship in 18 months. They had constructed hundreds of warships in weeks. Their factories worked without rest. Their people worked without rest. It was as if the entire species had transformed itself into a war machine. Kethvoran had conquered many worlds, He had seen many species fight back, but he had never seen anything like this. A knock came at his door. Enter. It was Thos, the ancient council member who had first noted the humans' violent history. We are approaching the human system, Thos said. The fleet is ready. And the humans? They are waiting for us. They have built more ships, more defenses. Their moon is now a fortress that our weapons cannot crack. The gas giants' moons are covered in weapons platforms. They have turned the asteroid belt into a minefield. Kethvoran closed his eyes. In 3 months. They did all this in 3 months. Yes. We have been conquering worlds for 12,000 years, Kethvoran said. We have perfected our doctrines. We have never failed. And these creatures, these primitives who have barely left their own planet, are matching us. Thos said nothing. There was nothing to say. The Valkorath fleet emerged into the human system like a tide of death. 2,000 warships, each one carrying the fury of an empire that had never known defeat. They outnumbered the human fleet nearly 10 to 1. Admiral Rourke watched them come. She stood on the bridge of the Thermopylae, her hands clasped behind her back. The massive battleship was scarred from the previous battle. Patches of new armor covered holes in its hull. But it was ready to fight again. That is a lot of ships, said Captain Morrison, her second in command. Yes, Rourke agreed. We cannot win a straight fight. No. We cannot. Morrison looked at her. Then what is the plan? Rourke smiled. Who said anything about a straight fight? The Second Battle of Sol began at 1400 hours. Earth time. The Valkorath advanced in perfect formation, just as their doctrines demanded. Kethvoran himself commanded from the axiom of conquest. Positioned at the center of the fleet, he would direct this battle personally. He would not make the mistakes Yithra had made. The humans fell back. Their ships retreated toward the inner planets, firing as they went. They were buying time, Kethvoran realized. But for what? They cannot run forever, he said. Press forward. Drive them toward their world. The fleet advanced, past the orbit of the outer planets, past the gas giants and their armed moons. The weapons platforms fired at them, but the Valkorath shields held. Losses were acceptable. Then they reached the asteroid belt. Mines, an officer reported. Thousands of mines, hidden in the asteroids. Navigate around them, Kethvoran ordered. Use the standard protocols. But the mines were not standard. They did not simply explode when ships came near. Some waited until ships had passed, then detonated behind them. Some followed the ships, attaching to hulls before exploding. Some released clouds of debris that clogged engines and blinded sensors. The Valkorath fleet slowed. They lost ships to the minefield. Not many, but enough to frustrate Kethvoran. These humans do not fight fairly, Thos observed. No, Kethvoran agreed. They fight to win. Finally, the fleet cleared the asteroid belt. The human world lay before them, a blue marble hanging in the void. The human fleet formed up between them and their goal, 200 human ships against 2,000 Valkorath warships. Now, Kethvoran said. Now we end this. He ordered the Axiom maneuver, the most complex and devastating tactic in Valkorath doctrine. It required perfect coordination between all ships. It created a 3-dimensional net of fire that no enemy had ever escaped. The fleet began to move. Ships spread out in precise patterns. Weapons charged. In moments, the trap would spring, and the humans would be caught in a crossfire from which there was no escape. Admiral Rourke watched the Valkorath formation take shape. She nodded slowly. There it is, she said. The Axiom maneuver. Just like the simulations predicted. Admiral? Morrison asked. We studied their communications for 2 years. We learned everything about their tactics. We ran millions of simulations. We knew exactly what they would do when facing a smaller force. She picked up her command microphone. All ships, execute pattern Omega. Now, in the outer reaches of the solar system, past the orbit of the farthest planet, something stirred. Hidden in the darkness of the Oort cloud, 50 human ships had been waiting for weeks. They were running silent, their engines cold, invisible to Valkorath sensors. Now they woke up. They accelerated toward the battle at maximum speed. They came from behind the Valkorath fleet, from a direction the aliens had never thought to watch. Why would they? No species had ever hidden ships so far from the battlefield. No species except humans, who had learned long ago that the best attack came from where your enemy least expected it. Supreme War Master, an officer screamed. Ships behind us, enemy ships. Keth Voran spun around. This was impossible. They had scanned the entire system. There had been nothing out there. How many? 50 contacts. They are closing fast. 50 ships was not many. But the Valkorath fleet was in the middle of the Axiom maneuver. All ships were committed to specific positions. They could not easily turn to face a new threat, and then, the human fleet attacked from the front. Admiral Rourke had timed it perfectly. As the Valkorath scrambled to respond to the ships behind them, the main human fleet charged forward. The Thermopylae led the way, its massive guns blazing. The Valkorath were caught between two forces. The Axiom maneuver collapsed. Ships broke formation. Confusion spread. This was exactly what humans excelled at. Chaos. Disorder. Fighting without formations. Without plans. Adapting to every moment. The battle became a slaughter. Valkorath ships died by the hundreds. They could not coordinate their fire. They could not support each other. Every principle they had learned told them to reform, to establish order, but the humans would not let them. The Thermopylae found the axiom of conquest. Admiral Rourke gave the order personally. All weapons. Target the enemy flagship. Fire. The barrage tore through the axiom's shields. It shattered the ancient warship's hull. It killed the crew in their stations. Keth Voran felt his ship dying around him. Fire spread through the corridors. The lights failed. The artificial gravity stuttered. He crawled to a communication terminal. With his last strength, he opened a channel to the hegemony, to his people, to the species that had thought itself invincible. This is Supreme War Master Keth Voran. I am transmitting a final message. He coughed blood. The darkness was closing in. We were wrong. We thought we had mastered war. We thought our doctrines were perfect. We thought no species could challenge us. He looked at the screen, where the human battleship was visible through the smoke and fire. The humans have taught us the truth. War has no masters. It cannot be perfected. It can only be survived. He gasped for breath. Do not wake them again. Do not give them a reason to come for us. Let them have their small world. Let them have their system. The screen flickered. The axiom of conquest began to break apart, because if they ever turn their fury outward, if they ever decide to conquer instead of defend, nothing will stop them. Nothing in this galaxy or any other. Supreme War Master Keth Voran died with those words on his lips. Around him, the greatest fleet the Valkorath had ever assembled burned and fell. And above the chaos, the Thermopylae stood triumphant, scarred but unbroken. The masters of war had been taught their final lesson. 1 year later, the galaxy had changed forever. The news of the Valkorath defeat spread like wildfire. 2,000 warships destroyed. Supreme War Master Keth Voran killed. The greatest military power in known history humbled by a species they had dismissed as primitives. At first, no one believed it. The reports must be wrong. The Valkorath must be hiding their true losses. No species could defeat the hegemony. But then the evidence came. Recordings of the battle. Images of Valkorath wreckage drifting in the human system. The final transmission of Keth Voran himself, warning his people to stay away. The hegemony began to crack. For 12,000 years, the Valkorath had ruled through fear. Their subject species obeyed because they believed resistance was impossible. The 18 principles of absolute victory were not just military doctrine. They were proof that the Valkorath could never be beaten. Now that proof was ash. On 100 worlds, rebellions erupted. Species that had been slaves for generations rose up against their masters. They did not know if they could win, but they knew the Valkorath could lose. That was enough. The Valkorath tried to crush the rebellions. But their fleets were scattered, their leadership dead. And every world they attacked, they had to wonder, what if the humans come? What if those terrible ships appear and turn their warriors into dust? Within 6 months, the hegemony had lost half its territory. Within a year, it had collapsed entirely. The Valkorath retreated to their home worlds, a shattered remnant of what they had been, and humanity stepped onto the galactic stage. The first Galactic Council was held on a space station orbiting Earth. Representatives from 100 species gathered there, many of them meeting each other as equals for the first time. They were nervous, uncertain. The old order was gone. No one knew what would replace it. Admiral Catherine Rourke addressed the assembly. She looked older than she had a year ago. The battles had taken their toll. Gray streaked her hair, and new lines marked her face. But her eyes were still sharp, her voice still strong. "I know what many of you fear," she said. "You look at us and see another Valkorath. You see conquerors. You see a species that will replace one empire with another." She paused, letting the words settle. "I understand that fear. If I were in your position, I would feel the same." She walked to a window that looked out on Earth. The blue planet hung in the void, peaceful and quiet. "Let me tell you something about my species. We have spent most of our history at war with ourselves. We have built weapons that could destroy our entire world. We have come close to using them more than once." She turned back to face the assembly. "We know what empire does. We have seen it on our own planet. We have watched nations rise and fall. We have learned that conquest creates only temporary power and permanent enemies. Humanity has no interest in ruling this galaxy. We have enough trouble ruling ourselves." A ripple of uncertain laughter passed through the crowd. "What we want is simple," Rourke continued. "We want to be left alone. We want to trade with those who wish to trade. We want to learn from those who wish to teach. And we want to live in a galaxy where no species dominates all others." She smiled, and for a moment she looked almost kind. "So that is what we offer. Not an empire, a partnership, a council where every species has a voice, where disputes are settled through words, not weapons, where the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them." The Valkorath believed they had mastered war. They were wrong. War cannot be mastered. It can only be ended. And that is what we hope to do. Not through conquest, but through peace. The assembly was silent. Then, slowly, applause began. It grew and grew until it echoed through the station like thunder. 3 months later, a young Valkorath officer requested a meeting with Admiral Rourke. His name was Kethvorin, nephew of the fallen Supreme War Master. He had survived the Second Battle of Seoul by sheer luck. His ship had been disabled early in the fighting, and he had drifted unconscious in an escape pod until human rescue vessels found him. He had spent months as a prisoner of war. The humans had treated him well, far better than the Valkorath treated their prisoners. This had confused him deeply. Now he sat across from Admiral Rourke in a small office on the lunar surface. Through the window, he could see the Thermopylae in its orbital dock. Workers swarmed over its hull, repairing the damage from countless battles. "Why did you want to see me?" Rourke asked. Kethvorin struggled to find words. "I need to understand. My people ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We had numbers. We had technology. We had experience that spanned generations. How did you defeat us?" Rourke leaned back in her chair. She looked at him for a long moment. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes. You studied war like a science," she said. "You reduced it to principles and doctrines. You believed that if you followed the rules perfectly, you would always win." She shook her head. "But war is not a science. It is chaos. It is desperation. It is doing whatever you must do to survive another day. It cannot be reduced to rules because the moment you make a rule, someone will find a way to break it." She leaned forward. "We lived war like a disease. Every scar on Earth taught us something. Every conflict showed us that yesterday's tactics would not work tomorrow. We had to keep adapting, keep changing, keep finding new ways to hurt each other. Because if we stopped, we died." Kethvorin was silent. "Your people looked at our history and saw savages killing savages," Rourke continued. "You thought it was a weakness. You were wrong. It was our greatest strength. Every generation of humans inherited the lessons of the generation before. Every war made us better at the next one. But that means you will never stop fighting." Kethvorin said. "You will always be at war." Rourke smiled sadly. "Maybe. We hope not. We hope that now that we have seen what is out there, we can turn our energy towards something better. But we will never forget what we are. We will never become soft or complacent. Because the moment we do, someone will try to take advantage of it." She stood and walked to the window. "We do not want to conquer the galaxy. We want to live in peace. But if anyone threatens us or our friends, we will remind them what we are capable of." She looked at the Thermopylae, massive and scarred and unbroken. "And we will build more ships." Kethvorin nodded slowly. He understood now. The humans were not monsters. They were survivors. They had clawed their way up from mud and blood and endless conflict. They had learned lessons that the Valkorath, in their arrogance, had never needed to learn. He rose and bowed. a gesture of respect that his people rarely gave to anyone. "Thank you, Admiral. I think I understand now. What will you do?" "I will go home. I will tell my people what I have learned, and I will help them rebuild. Not as conquerors, but as something better." Rourke shook his hand. "Good luck." He left, and she turned back to the window. Earth hung in the sky, blue and green and beautiful. Her world, her people, survivors of 1,000,000 battles. The Thermopylae orbited peacefully above. Its guns were silent. Its missiles slept in their tubes, but they were ready. They would always be ready. Across the galaxy, in 100 languages, a new proverb was spreading. Children repeated it. Old soldiers whispered it. It appeared on walls and in books and in the memories of species who had just won their freedom. The Valkorath claimed to master war. The humans reminded them they were only students. Admiral Rourke smiled at the thought. The galaxy was at peace. Humanity would make sure it stayed that way. Not because they feared war, but because they knew its cost better than anyone. They had been fighting for 200,000 years. They were tired, but if anyone woke them again, heaven help them all.